This is a contribution from Kuzu Console to the Algorand ecosystem by Stephen Sunday and Seth Michael. In this presentation, we will learn how to develop decentralized application in the form of a web app using the .NET Core framework to develop a crowdfunding application on the Algorand Network. So right here I have my Visual Studio 2019 open. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. Click on create a new project. Go ahead and click on, we can see our template options here. Go ahead and click on the ASP.NET Core web application, which is this one right here. So click on it and click on next. So then we'll be asked to configure our new project, and I'm going to name this Algorand Crowdfund. You can choose or change the location of your application if you're following along. I'm going to leave mine where it is by default. After doing that, click on create. So this is where we're going to configure or select the type of web application we want to create with the ASP.NET Core. Right, I'm using the ASP.NET Core. That's the latest version on this device. Currently is the ASP.NET Core 3.1 version. So go ahead and click on this change so that we can make or authorize an authentication, which is the individual user authentication. So this is going to come with login and registration processes already made or system made by default. So click on the web application with model view controller and click on create. Alright, so we can see our project has created successfully. We can see our MVC, we can see our controller, our model, our views, our data connected to our database. And then right here we can see our SQL Server Explorer. I'm going to go ahead and auto hide this. So click on this pin. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to connect my application with the Algorand network. So let's right click on the project name or project solution, which is the Algorand Crowdfund. Right click on it and then head over to manage Nuget packages. So click on manage Nuget packages to get started. So right here we can see our Nuget packages opened. Head over to browse and search for Algorand. So we can see the Algorand SDK package right here. Go ahead and click on it, and then we can see the latest stable version, which is what we're going to install. So go ahead and install it. Okay, so our package is successfully installed. We can see this arrow right here. We can see the stable version has been installed. We can also check via the install section here. We can see the package. We can also check via our dependencies, head to packages, and we can see the Algorand package installed. So at this stage, we can start writing our codes to get started. So next thing we're going to do, we're going to configure our registration and login. So that whenever a new user registers a new account, he or she will have his or her account address on the Algorand network and the mnemonic key also. So a user can register, log in, create a campaign, and then get funded by backers who support the campaign. So everything will be performed on the Algorand network, which means algos will be funded. That is through the crowdfunding process. The funds which will be backed by the backers to the owner of that campaign will be done through the use of algos on the Algorand network. So the next thing we're going to do, let's open this areas folder, right click on it, head over to add, new scaffolded item. Head over to identity, click on it and click on add. So we'll be asked to select or choose what we want to do next. I'm going to click on override all files. Click on the Algorand crowdfund.data and then click on add. Okay, so we can see a scaffold readme text, which means we have successfully added the identity, which is where the our registration and login processes will be handled. So let's head over to identity, pages, head over to account, and then click on the register we have over here. This will take us to registration page, but before we do that, let's go to the code behind, which is the register.cshtml.cs. Right click on it, or double click on it rather. Okay, so everything has been automatically generated for us based off what we did earlier. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to create an application user consisting of the user's account address and mnemonic key when the user signs up or registers an account. So inside of the models folder, create an application user class and add the following fields to it. Make sure you inherit from the identity user, which contains the implementation of all the fields required when the user registers. So the reason why we're doing this is because we cannot change anything from the identity user. Everything that is static and made by default, we can't make changes to it. So the only way we can make changes to it is to create a class that will inherit from the identity user. So by creating this application user class and inheriting from identity user, which means the application user class now has access to everything the identity user has, with an addition of these two. So whenever a user creates an account, he or she is going to have an account address and a key in addition to the username, email, password, confirm password, and every other details that is required when registering an account. And mind you, you need this namespace that's using Microsoft.asp.NET core.identity to be able to use this identity user. So after doing this, the next thing you will do is head over to the registration code. Make sure you import this using statement right here, which is the using Algorand crowdfund.models, so that we can get the application user that we made use of. So inside of the registration, right here where we can see our Algorand.accounts, making an instance of the Algorand account, right? So we have a variable for key where we're going to get our mnemonic key based on what we've instantiated from our Algorand accounts. We do the same thing to get our account address, and then by default this is going to be our identity user, which has now been changed to application user. So by changing it to application user, we can now make use of our key and account address. Had it been it was identity user, we will not be able to use this key because key is not part of it. But because we made an instance of the identity user, we now have access to every other thing, including the additional fields we added inside of the application user class. So by doing this, whenever a user creates an account or registers, he or she is going to have a username, an email, password, a key, which is the Algorand key, and then for the account address, and also an account address. So an account address and a key associated with that account. So having done this, we're clear of this registration process, but that's not all. We also need to change this is what we call dependency injection. We're injecting our sign-in manager, user manager, iLogger, email sender. We do not need an email sender, so I'm going to go ahead and remove it. So wherever we have an email sender, because we do not need any email confirmation at this stage in time. So go ahead and remove everything containing the email sender. Okay, so back up here, we're going to change this identity user to application user. So go ahead and copy this application user we have and replace it with what we have over here. The same goes for this two also. So we're also going to need to do the same thing for everything that we have over here. Forgot password, confirm email. We have to change from identity user, we have to change it to application user. We have to do this for all of them, but to save time, I'm just going to do for this two, and then later on will be completed. You can complete the remaining at your own comfort zone. If you are following along, you need to also change them to application user, all of them. So at this stage, I've added the application user inside of all the places I need it to be. We can see our login partial contains the application user. Ensure you do that also if you're following along. The register confirmation this is the code behind of it. I've also changed this to application user, the logout also. So everything concerning login, registration, logging out, signing in, you need to add the application user to all of them, where identity user is. So find identity user and replace it with application user. So one more place we need to add our application user is inside of our startup.cs class. So we need to replace what we have here, the services. I'm going to highlight the whole thing and replace it with this. I'll add identity. I'm going to include the application user. So go ahead and do that and import the using namespace, which is our crowdfund.models. Okay, so let's go ahead and add this using statement here using Algorand crowdfund models. Go ahead and include the using namespace. So the next thing we did was to create classes for request funds and funders. So inside of our request funds class, this is where a user can create a campaign for his or her crowdfunding and have these properties or fields inside the class. So we're going to have an ID, a fund title, a fund description, the amount needed, the date it was created, and then the user creating the account. We have a not mapped backers count. This will count the number of backers that this particular campaign has, and then an enumerable of funders. So this is sort of like a one-to-many relationship. So we can have one campaign to many backers, which is why we have an enumerable over here. We can have as many. It's going to iterate over a collection of funders, which will be associated with this request funds. Inside of the funders class, we have similar properties. We have our ID, we have the amount that the funder will pay or fund or back the campaign. We have the key. This is the money key of the person trying to fund the account. This is this is going to be the receiver's address, and then the receiver, which is this is the funder, is going to be users, which is why we have this virtual application user. And then request fund ID, we're going to get the ID of the fund or the campaign we're trying to request from, and then we have our relationship, which is funders to a particular campaign for request funds. So having done this, let's go ahead and add these two classes that we added into our database. So we're going to add migrations that will then be added into our database. To do that, let's run the following commands. Let's go ahead and run add migration, and I'm going to name this init for initial migration. Go ahead and hit enter. Okay, so our migration was performed successfully. We can see when the building started, it succeeded, and then now we're going to run our update database. So go ahead and run the following commands if you're following along. So this is going to update the database with everything that was added during the migrations. Okay, so our update was done successfully. We can also see it right here. So the next thing we're going to do is to add our controllers and the necessary pages needed for our fund and our request funds. So go ahead and right click on controllers, click on add, head over to controllers, and then we are going to click on the Mvc controller with views using entity framework and click on add. So this will prompt us to select the model class we are creating this for. So I'm going to start with request funds, and then inside of the data, our crowdfund data folder, and then I'm going to click on add. I'll do the same thing for funders also, the same process of creating the controller. So this is going to install the necessary things needed, and then scaffold and create all the code snippets needed. This is going to be more like a CRUD operation that we're going to twist and tweak to our taste. Okay, so inside of our request funds controller, which has just been generated, we have made some tweaks and added some things to it. So this line of code here was added. We just injected the user manager into our controller, and then did the same thing right here inside of the constructor, passing in the parameters of our user manager. So inside of our index, this is the home page. This is going to be the home page, which will display details concerning the current user that is logged in, which will be passed in via a view back into the view, and then it's going to also return what our request funds will be inside of a list, which is why we have a to list here with our include statement for user and funders. So down below, inside of our details page, this is where we're going to view a particular campaign to see the details of that campaign. This is the class or page that will enable us to do that. And then we have a view model which was created. I'm going to take us down to where the view model is. The view model is consisting of request funds, funders, and an enumerable of request funds, which means that we're going to have a request funds, we're going to have funders, that's the individuals that funded that particular campaign. We're also going to see it inside of the campaign, and then we're going to have other campaigns that have been created by other users. So initially, our controller are supposed to handle requests. So if you want to do this, you can actually create a new class separately inside of the models and call it view model and write this particular line of code inside, and then passing in the necessary things needed inside of the controller for it to work. And then right here we have a private list, right, consisting of a list of our request funds. So this was actually consisting of our request funds list that we have over here. So it's going to fetch from our database context a list of other funds that have been requested for, which are also known as campaigns, the campaigns that we have. So inside of the model, we have our my model.request fund list consisting of the method that we have down here, and then our my model.request funds passing in our including statement for our request funds, and we have also the same thing for funders. So those are the individuals who are going to fund that particular campaign. So that is that for this particular controller. So inside of the create controller, I'm also going to make some tweaks to it so we can see some of the details that have been passed in together with it. So when creating a campaign, we have a username here, or this can be called user, where we can get a user details because of our application user. When the user is trying to create an account, we need to get that particular user his or her details, which is why we have this over here. So we're going to find by name async. So this is going to find the name of the current user logged in session, and then pass in the user details as associated with that campaign that the user is creating. Having done that, we're going to add it into our database context and save the changes before redirecting us back to our index view, which we saw above up there. So inside of the funders controller, remember we created the request funds controller and the funders controller. We added the using Algorand namespaces that we need, including the using Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Identity. We added our dependency injection consisting of our user manager inside of our constructor, also passing the parameters needed or necessary. Inside of our index view, this is going to return a list of all the funders that have funded a particular campaign in one way or the other, and then we have details of that. We're not really interested in that yet. What we need, or what we're interested in, is this particular functionality, our create functionality. So inside of our create functionality, we made use of our user manager that we made a dependency injection of, and then we have our variable for username, getting or finding a user in session by his or her name, right? And then we have our funders.user, that is from our class of funders. We are passing in the funders.user to be equal to this particular username right here, consisting of the user details, and then funders.key consisting of the current user in session, because when the user creates an account, he or she is going to have a mnemonic key and an address, which is what we did earlier on when we created the application user class. So the username.key is going to be passed in to this fund as a key, and then we have our fund method. Inside of our fund method, this is where the whole process of funding takes place on the Algorand network. So we have our Algorand API address, our Algorand API token, our source account passing in the key to the containing that particular account that is about to fund an account or a different account. We have our destination account, which is the receiver, the person we are funding his or her accounts. Here we have an instance of our account, making an instance of it. We have our SRC here, signifying source. Then we have our Algorand API instance, which we made an instance of, passing in the parameters of our Algorand API address and our Algorand API token, right? So here we have a try and catch exception, which we're making use of the Algorand API instance by giving it or initializing it to a variable called trans for transactions, right? In case you come across any error, this is the error message that we're expected to get. So right here we have our transaction parameter response, and then we made use of it, of our transaction params right here, passing in the Algorand API instance of transaction params. Then in case you come across an error during that, it's going to catch the error and then throw this exception error of could not get params. Then the next thing is the amount sent. We have a variable called amount sent, making use of our utils.algos to microalgos, passing in the amount of that will be paid by a user trying to fund another campaign. So right here we have our variable for transaction, getting the payment transaction details. Now right here, this is a method that contains the address from, address to, the amount, a message associated with that transaction, and then our parameter response. So we passed in the necessary details needed. We have our address here, and then our destination address, the amount that was sent, the message, and then our transaction params. So in the next step, we have our signed transaction, making use of our source, which we made instance of our account at the top, which is right here. We're making use of it down here, making a signed transaction. So we're more like signing transaction to be processed. And then we have a console.writeLine. Although this is a web app, we do not need a console.writeLine, which will not display on the web, but we're going to make use of a viewback rather, but not here. So this is going to actually print out signed transaction with transaction ID. So this is going to get the transaction ID we need for that transaction. So right here we have a try and catch. So as you can see a comment here, send the transaction to the network. So this is what will finalize our transaction and return our message for us. So we have a variable ID making use of our utils of submit transaction. So this is actually going to submit the transaction on the Algorand network. So passing in our Algorand API instance and our signed transaction, right? So the next step, having done this, is we're going to have a successful sent transaction with ID and then passing in the ID of that transaction. I'm going to quickly change this into a viewback, which will then be passed in to our front end. That is where our pages would be. So having done that, we're going to wait for the transaction to complete before doing any other thing. And then in case you come across an error, we're going to catch that error exception and return this particular message we have. So that is all about the fund method. So that is that about the fund method. So after that, we're going to have our context.add. This is going to add whatever has been added into the fields, into the database, and then save the changes of what was added before redirecting us back into our request controller.index page. So right here, I just made a quick addition into our create functionality. We can see a viewbox.success, which means successfully, or containing a text, which means successfully transferred funds. So this will display whenever we have a successful creation of funds. So let's head into the request funds view pages inside of the views folder. So head over to the request funds page or folder, head over to details so we can see what we've done. So let me head to the top. So at the top here, we're using the model of Algorand crowdfund controllers, the request fund controller dot view model. Remember, we created a view model inside of the controller there, which is what we're making use of, and then passing in these details of campaign owner, title, basically details containing the controller. And we created the view model so we can have additional information or details about one particular campaign. So right here we can see backers, right, on line 49. So this is going to contain a list of all the backers or people who have funded this particular campaign, right? So we're going to have the accounts, the user address, which is his or her Algorand account address, and then saying that this user has funded this amount of algos to this campaign. All right, so in case the user or the current user viewing the details of this particular campaign, in case the user wants to fund or help fund this campaign, we also have a fund this campaign right here, where the user can enter the amount and then getting the funder's ID, which is hidden, the funder's receiver address, which is also hidden. We do not want to display that publicly on the page. And then we have the request funds ID, which is the ID of the particular page we are in, and then passing in the value, which is our model request funds ID, which is the ID of this particular campaign we're viewing. So inside of the index of our request funds, we have going to have an enumerable of our request funds, getting a list of all the funds or campaigns rather. So we have the viewback.success message, which is going to display that our transaction was successful, and then our address. So this is going to basically be our home page, and we should see our address and our key in case we want to make a transaction and we forget what our key is, or in case we want to fund our account via the bank.testnet for Algorand Network, which can be used to fund accounts on testnet. In case you want to also do that and we forgot what our address is, or in case you also forgot what our key is. And mind you, this is for demo purposes, which is why I'm going to put this key here and display it publicly. Your key should be hidden and private to only you and you alone. So if you generate your account address and you have your key, try and keep it in a private place where only you can access it, because if someone malicious has access to your key, your account key, transactions can be made with just that key. So try as much as possible to keep your key safe. So to continue, we have a table containing a list of items. We have the fund, title, description, amounts needed, and we have backers count. So this is going to consist of the number of backers that have actually backed this campaign. Let me put a space to separate it, backers count, and then we're going to have enumerable for each loop containing the details of that particular campaign. So next page is into our funders. We're going to head over to the create and check it out. So inside of the funders folder, inside of the create page, we're going to have these details, or this form rather, where we're going to have the amount. So we're going to enter the amount. So we're going to have the request funds ID and the receiver address that we're trying to fund. So when we head back to the controller of funders, remember we're supposed to have a key, also a key field, a field for our key, which is supposed to be private. So I'm going to actually handle that from the back end. So when we head over to the top, we can see our funders key being passed in here directly, so it doesn't have to go in from our form. So the next thing, or the next place we're going to head to, is our startup class. So let's head over to the startup class and then make some changes. We're going to actually change our map controller routes. So when we start up the application, by default it's supposed to take us to the home controller and the index page, but we want to change it to be our request funds controller and then our index page. So having done this, we can proceed to the next step. So at this stage, we can go ahead and run our application to test it. So go ahead and click on debug and start without debugging. Okay, so our application is up and running. So the next thing we're going to do is to create an account. So let's go ahead and register. Click on the register button. So this will take us to the register page. But before I did that, mind you, when I created or started the application, I had to manually navigate to the home.index because the request funds page we made as our initial home page, we have to be logged in to access that page. So let's head over to the home.index page first and then register an account. Head over there, put your email and password, just create an account and register to log in. Alright, so I've successfully registered an account and I'm currently logged in as admin. So this is the mail I use, admin@gmail.com, and this is the account address that I have for the admin, and this is the mnemonic key that was generated together with the account that was created. So at this stage we can go ahead and fund this particular account, which is the admin account that will be used to fund other accounts. Okay, so go ahead and copy your account address and head over to the Algorand dispenser. As you can see, this is the link bank.testnet.algorand.network. Go ahead and click on the checkbox for I am not a robot to confirm, and then paste in the account address and hit the dispense button. This will dispense about 100 algos into our account. So we can see a code status of 200, which means we have successfully funded the account. So let's head over to testnet.algoexplorer.io. So right here we can actually check details containing the testnet. So we can see latest blocks that have been created, we can see the latest transactions that have been made, and we can see some additional details about it. We can see block transaction speed about 4.30 seconds for a transaction to occur. So we can actually search for our account address details based on the account address. So paste in the account address here. We're running on the testnet, mind you. So by the time this completes, we will be able to see the funds that has been added into our account. So we should see about 100. Yes, so we can see the balances. We have about 100, which was funded into our accounts a minute ago, which was what we did with the dispenser right here. Okay, so let's head back to our application. Now that we have funded this particular account, let's go ahead and log out. So click on the logout, and then let's go ahead and register a new account with a separate user that will use to generate that account, the campaign that we're going to fund. Okay, so now we are registered as user@gmail.com. So but before we create a campaign for this user, let's head back to the code and make some changes quickly. Okay, so just before we create a campaign, let's head back to the request funds class and comment out what we have commented over here, the not mapped for backers count, so that we won't have any problem creating a request for creating a campaign in general when requesting for funds. So also let's go ahead and delete wherever we have backers count inside of our code, that is instead of the details we have and the index page of our request funds, we also have it. So go ahead and remove the wherever the backers count appears. We can remove it for the meantime before we can later on add it back. So on our browser we can go ahead and create a new campaign. So click on create new. Okay, so we can put our font title. I'm going to name this coffee business or coffee. Okay, so I'm going to name coffee, and then for font description is going to be coffee business, and then the amount I need, let's say I need about 40 algos, and then the dates, I'm going to select the month, February, let me say 19th 2021, and then time will be 1:30 p.m. Alright, I can go ahead and click on create. Okay, so right here we can see our campaign has created successfully with the necessary details that we filled in. coffee business. The amounts needed, we put about 40. That's this actually 40 algos, and then the DApp that we created manually, and then the user that created the account, so we can see it's corresponding with our username here. So we can also see additional details of this account by clicking on this details page. But before we do that, let's head back into the code. Right, so right here inside of our request funds controller, this place was then include. It was then include like this, but I changed it to include. So it's just an include, passing in the x, using the lambda expression to pass in our user to the details page. So this actually enables us to view the details page. Okay, so we can see the details of this particular campaign. We can see the user that created it and details about it. So, but we don't want to crowdfund our own campaign. So what we're going to do, we're going to log out and then log in as admin and then fund this campaign. Okay, so right now I'm logged in as admin, and I'm going to go ahead and click on details for this campaign over here for coffee business. Okay, so we can see our campaign right here, the details of the campaign. We can see the user that created the campaign, the user's address, the coffee, which is the campaign title, and the campaign description, coffee business, the amount needed, which is 40 algos, as we're dealing with algos. So okay, we have other campaigns right here, and then we're supposed to have backers here, which should contain the list of the people that have backed this particular campaign. So to do that, let's head back to the code and configure this correctly for our backers. So inside of this is what is actually going to take care of the backers, this that we have right here. So we're going to head back to our request funds controller, right? And then inside of the view model class, which is right here, we're going to add an enumerable of funders, right? So we have an enumerable of request funds, and then we're also going to add this particular one right here, enumerable of funders. So this is going to contain a list of the people that have funded the accounts, and then right here inside of the details, or rather right here, we have a private class of a list containing the list of funders, which is what we have here. And then inside of our view model, we're passing in our funders list should be equal to the funder list method that we have right here. So this will enable us see the list of people that have backed this campaign. So next thing we're going to do, we're going to put our amount. Okay, so this person needs about 40 algos, so we're going to give the person 20 and then click on create. Remember, this ID here is the ID of this particular campaign, which is 2, so it's going to also carry the ID of this particular campaign. So click on create. Right, this is going to take us to the initial page where we can fund this account. So we have the amount right here, we have the ID of the campaign, and we have the address of the receiver. This is the address of the receiver that created, or the person that created the campaign. So by the time we click on create, hit the button, this is going to fund this this campaign that we have over here for the coffee. Okay, so right here we can see the funders index page containing the list of people that have funded it. So we can see the amount, we can see the key of this particular user, that's the admin. Remember, our key should be private, but I'm displaying it public here in case this is your first time seeing how an account key looks like. This is how it looks like. And then we have the receiver address, that's the address of the person who created the campaign, and we can see the campaign that we funded, which is the coffee business campaign. Okay, so if we head back to the home page and then we head to the details of this particular campaign, we should be able to see that we have funded this campaign. So we can see it right here. So admin@gmail.com has funded 20 algos to this campaign, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do it one more time, making the completion of this particular campaign to make it 40. So 20, I'm going to run it again for the second time to completely fund the campaign. Okay, so I'm going to head back into the testnet.algoexplorer.io to check if we have been deducted 40 algos. Yes, so we can see we have been deducted twice to the same receiver address. So we can see the address of the receiver. We have funded it 2 times, which was the second transaction we just made. All right, and we have our balances here. So we're going to run it one more time to fund it one more time with some little adjustments we're going to make. So back inside of the create page of our funders.create, this create page for funders, let's head there and then change this button to fund campaign. All right, so I'm going to change it to fund campaign. Okay, let me leave the space. Fund campaign. All right, the A should come before the. All right, so our button should say fund campaign. Okay, so let's go ahead and run the application again. Okay, so application is up and running. Let's go ahead and also copy this account address and check how much balance has been funded or how much algos has been funded into this account address. Sorry, the account address of this campaign, rather, not this one up here. This is this one that we have over here on the Algorand testnet explorer. So this is the account we're going to copy. My bad. So go ahead and copy it and then open this other link on the testnet algoexplorer.io link. So we're going to also paste in the account address inside of this search bar right here, still on the testnet, running on the testnet. So input the account address and hit the search button. So this is going to fetch the details of this particular account. So we should have about 40, yes, we should have about 40 algos now balances. So okay, so at this stage we have come to the end of this presentation. So we have learned how to create a campaign where a user can enter his or her campaign details and the amount he or she wants, when others can come and back his or her campaign by funding it with the required algos needed.